What's up, storyteller? I'm Clark Rowanson, the magic engineer, and it's time to talk about magic. In this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the topics I actually covered in one of my live streams. So the format may be a little bit different than you're used to. I sure hope you still enjoy the content, and we're going to jump over to that right now. So now we can move on from just taking Sanderson's first law and talking about plot problems themselves. Because again, I have a different version of Sanderson's first law of magic where, like I said before, the author's ability to satisfactorily solve plot problems is directly proportional to readers' understanding of said magic. So let's talk about plot problems. In my mind, it's actually pretty simple. I have to say in my mind, because there's a lot of stuff I'm like, oh yeah, that's basic, and then it's not because my brain is weird, or there will be things that are basic to other people and I can't grasp it for the life of me. Anyway, getting on a tangent. Plot problems, simply put, are problems that matter in the context of the plot. I mean, that's basically it. If it's something that is significant in the plot and is treated as significant, it's a plot problem. And it's not just, and that's where I'm gonna talk about the Black Company a little bit more. It's not just a matter of, would this event be significant if it happened in real life? Like, is this important to the characters? Is this important to their goals? That's not what it means. What I mean by significant in the plot is how much of the plot is spent dealing with this problem. So the more screen time you spend exploring, defining, or trying to resolve a question, a conflict, an issue, a problem, the bigger a plot problem it is. So dealing with the big bad guy, that is usually the main plot problem of a book or of a movie. We need to get rid of this person, or they are doing terrible things. We need to tear down the empire. So the problem is, how do we tear down the empire? Or how do we kill this person? And if you get all the way to the end and the solution to killing them just comes out of nowhere, that's the biggest plot problem in your entire story, and you just kind of tried to hand wave it away. And that's not great. Another way you can think about this, if you are familiar with the try-fail cycles in storytelling of they want to achieve something, they try, they fail, they try, they fail, they try, they succeed, but not the way they wanted, so they try, they fail. The more try-fail cycles you go through, the bigger a plot problem it is. If you go through any try-fail cycles, it's usually at least some kind of plot problem, because you're you spent enough time on it for them to try, fail, and have to try again, so it's at least some kind of plot problem. Now, when we're dealing with plot problems and trying to find satisfactory solutions to them, the first thing we really need to ask is whether what we're looking at is in fact a plot problem. And I really should have come up with a better name, because that alliteration, I'm trying really hard not to trip over my words. But there's a couple things you can look for. So if there's a problem that comes up and is instantly solved, it's not really a plot problem. Even if the potential consequences are severe, if it's solved that quickly, it's not a plot problem and you can use the magic to solve it quickly. That's exactly what happens in Black Company. There's a part around the middle of the series, I don't remember where exactly, and the Black Company of mercenaries, is going from point A to point B, and along that route, they are ambushed by a bunch of rebel forces multiple times on their journey. And really all we get is they have a couple of wizards in the company, and their magicians detect the ambushes and deal with them, and the company overcomes them and moves forward. Being ambushed by rebel forces is a big problem. Like, that's going to make you take different routes. It's going to have you do this and that and the other thing. But because they solved it just like instantly in terms of the duration on the page, it was fine. It's something that just came up. They solved it with magic and we moved on. Whereas in something like, if we go back to Mistborn, the first Mistborn trilogy, even the first book, we get to the part where Kelsier is fighting the Steel Inquisitor in the town square, and all of this stuff is happening. And Then if all of a sudden we spend like an entire chapter like on this awesome epic fight scene of everything going back and forth, and we're getting close to the end of the book, and if they suddenly just resolved that conflict, resolved that ambush with just like a wave of the hand and just be like, yep, magic, that would not be great. So if it's solved instantly or near instantly, you can also think if it's solved on the first try, it might not be a plot problem. And if you do have a problem, you may want to see maybe it's not the main problem. Maybe it's actually part of a bigger problem. So does this problem you're looking at, once they solve this problem, is that the end, or is this just the means to solving a bigger problem? And then with that, last thing to kind of consider is, does the problem carry significant consequences within the story and within the story that we see? So if it's something that is going to cause severe mental, physical, psychological trauma on a character, even if it's just one character, in a mundane or personal way, that might be a serious problem. Then again, you might decide to have them suffer those consequences, and then the problem becomes dealing with it and so on. But if this thing happens and it doesn't really matter to anybody present or the direction the story is going, then it's not it's not a plot problem within the context of your story. Hey, quick break. Just want to say, if you are enjoying this video, please do take a second to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It helps tremendously. And that's all I've got. So back to the content. The best example I really have for a lot of this is Princess Bride, because Wesley dying is a problem. It's absolutely a problem, and it's something they need to deal with. But Wesley's death is not the main plot problem of the book. And because of that, that's why it was okay for his death to be solved literally with a chocolate-covered miracle pill. And it was still satisfying, because the book, it didn't just end there, and there were consequences for what happened. He didn't take they didn't give Wesley the miracle pill and then instantly he was alert and instantly he was fine and as though nothing had happened. There were lasting consequences from that. And also, the story wasn't over. They still needed to rescue Buttercup, and they still needed to deal with the Count. Like, bringing Wesley back, that problem there, and the solution to that problem rose and fell fairly quickly. He died, and then shortly after, they brought him back to life in overall context of the story. So, very short-lived problem. Bringing Wesley back to life wasn't the main problem they were trying to solve. So, bringing him back to life was a means to solve the real problem, which was dealing with Count Rogan and rescuing Buttercup. So I really like that example, because it's literally has to deal with a character dying and bringing them back to life, and yet the death and bringing him back to life isn't a very big plot problem. So, something to think about. Now, when you're wanting to solve plot problems effectively, we've talked about this before. We talked about this earlier when we were talking about Sanderson's first law. You need to foreshadow the solution in advance and then explain enough for the solution to make sense. I'm emphasizing those words the way I am, and in I'm sure is a very annoying fashion, because that specificity is what will allow you to satisfactorily solve plot problems with soft and irrational magic systems. Because if you home in on what your plot problem is, you really home in on what the solution is that you want to provide, then you can make sure that you are foreshadowing and explaining just the solution and leaving the rest vague, irrational, and soft. And it's fine. That's a big part of why Harry Potter works like in isolation, each book in isolation. She did a good job for each of the individual books foreshadowing what was going to be important for that solution of that book. Now, her continuity and the implications of things as she introduced them into the world, not as solid, but that's fine. But there it worked. because she didn't have to explain the entire wizarding world all at once. She just had to explain a tiny piece and foreshadow that tiny piece before they used it to address the problems they were facing. Then also the amount of foreshadowing and explanation you need is directly proportional to the size of the plot problem. So if this is the main problem of your entire book, you need to be building on that, teaching that, building the foundation from early on in the book. Doesn't have to be the very beginning, but you need to spend a fair amount of time foreshadowing and making sure it's solid and people understand it and are ready for it to appear. If it's something that is just it's a mini arc in there, you don't need to foreshadow that as much. And it doesn't mean, and where you foreshadow doesn't have to be like directly in relation and proximity. So if you have a small arc in the end of the book that you want to solve, you can foreshadow that at the very beginning, just a little bit before. It's fine. The point is the amount of time you spend foreshadowing is going to be proportional, maybe not exactly proportional, but it will be relational to the size of the problem that it's dealing with. Also, last thing to remember is how you solve your problems is going to depend on the experience you want to deliver. The only reason I bring this up is if you haven't read many mysteries, this may not make sense to you. If you have read or watched mysteries, I'm sure we have all experienced that story where we get to the end and it feels like the author is standing there right in front of you, pointing and laughing and saying, haha, I fooled you. You didn't guess it. A lot of times I didn't guess it because the answer you gave me was insane, but that's not the point. So that's not an experience you want to deliver. I don't know anybody that really enjoys being pointed and laughed at, saying, haha, I tricked you, stupid. You don't want your readers to feel that. So try and pay attention to how it's going to make them feel. It's like some of the best stuff, and this is part of what Sanderson does really well, is he makes you feel smart as he reveals the solution because you're following along and seeing the solution unfold. That's great. Even better are those mysteries where it clicks into place in your brain like half a page before it gets revealed in the book. Like they're starting to lay foundation, they're thinking through the facts, and it hits you, and then it hits the character, and that's like the best thing ever. When you can get that, it's amazing. All of that is about if you want to solve plot problems. Talked about this a little bit before, but if you want to use magic to create plot problems, there's a lot more stuff that you can hand wave as long as the solution doesn't directly involve, as long as the solution doesn't involve directly addressing the magical problem, that's fine. Like if somebody shows up, does hand wavy magic thing, and it makes a thing happen, and then you're trying to deal with the person, that's fine. But if you have something where a magic rock punches into the earth and starts doing a thing and they have to neutralize the magic rock, well, neutralizing the rock requires understanding the rock. And so now the magic system itself is integral to the solution to the problem because it's integral to the problem. So it's a lot of weird gray areas to move around in with some of that. But a lot of times if the magic just creates the problem, but then they are solving it not by tackling the magic, but by tackling things around it, that's okay. So for example, if magic creates a superhuman who then becomes a tyrant and starts lording over all of Chicago, and like in Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson, okay, that's a bad example. But yeah, so it creates a supervillain who starts lording over everything. You don't really necessarily need to deal with the magic. You just need to overcome the person. And that may or may not require a magical solution. It's going to depend on the story. Now, if the magic isn't part of the solution, you really don't need to worry about it in terms of your magic. Like you still need to worry about it in terms of story structure and satisfactory conclusions. And everything we have talked about here all still applies to mundane solutions to plot problems. All of that carries over. If you're specifically worried about your magic, and then you don't need to worry about it. So if you have a soft, irrational magic system, and then the magic doesn't solve the problem, you never need to explain more of the magic. That's how Lord of the Rings does it. The problem doesn't get solved by magic doing a thing. All we need to know is ring, go into Mount Doom. That's it. So then everything else is Frodo getting there and them trying to get the ring into Mount Doom. So Gandalf's powers, the powers of Sauron, none of that matters. And it doesn't need to be explained because it's not solving the plot problem. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Now, the magic can set things up. It can create the environment for success. So if you're sieging a capital, magic can get you through the gate. It can get you into the final conflict. But then if you defeat the bad guy through mundane means or mundane trickery, that's fine. You just do it with a poison blade, or you do it with their known weakness of unobtainium or whatever that isn't part of the magic. It's just this person's singular weakness. That's all fine. That's all good. As long as, you foreshadow those things like we talked about before. So yeah, like if you're really worried about that and you're dealing with soft irrational magic, see if the magic is actually solving the problem. If you're not using it to solve the problem, then you don't need to explain anything about the magic, and you can likely carry on as you were doing it. There's other areas where you might need to explain it, but that has nothing to do with solving problems satisfactorily. Now, if you are using it to solve problems, especially soft irrational systems, like I said before, it's really about determining exactly what you need to share, what you need to explain to make it work, and then writing that balance between the known and the unknown. And that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was interesting. As always, you can leave questions in the comments below. I'm also going to leave some links in the description. So if you have some questions you want me to address in any of my live Q&As, or you have topics that you would like me to cover in these kind of live conversations, you can click those links, fill out the forms, and I will potentially cover your topic in one of these future live stream/video recordings. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for being so supportive in this kind of shift in format from what I was doing and what I would honestly prefer to do. So thank you again, and whatever you do, make sure that you keep writing and stay awesome.